Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Koestner. I am the primary host of the Dear Katie podcast, and we are so delighted to have you take this journey with us on our weekly podcast episodes. I just want to remind everyone to do great self-care. Thriving is part of the purpose of this podcast, and we definitely want you to take a break at any time. Warm bath, fresh air, walk a dog, have a bite of chocolate, whatever you need to do good care for yourself. Just as a reintroduction, if you're not familiar with me, I am the woman who was on the cover of Time magazine at age 18 as the first in history to speak out nationally and publicly as the victim of date rape. And HBO made a film about me, and I went on to become the executive director of the Take Back the Night Foundation. We are the oldest, largest global movement on sexual violence in all forms for all people in the world. So we encourage you to visit our website for lots more information. So I'm going to turn it over to our hosts and our guests for today. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Koestner, and I am so pleased to welcome today a very special guest, an unusual guest, Carol Berenger. As all of you as listeners know, we encourage you to take great care of yourself as you listen. Our topics can be traumatic for many, and feel free to push pause, take a break, take care of you first. But nonetheless, we're thrilled to have this time with Carol Berenger. Carol and I met actually in our own town. I went into her place of business, and she'll tell you a little bit more about what that is that she does. So Carol, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Katie.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited about this. And so I have a Pilates studio in Wayne, Pennsylvania. And what I seem to have the gift of is resiliency. And many people have trauma. So they have trauma for many reasons, just by being on the planet. And I've been around a very long time. I was born in 1952, and I'm going to let you do that math. Right after World War II, born into a family of a Chinese-American dad who had PTSD, and no one knew what that was, and a white mother. So that was, at the time, considered a mixed-race family. And many people not knowing the difference between the Chinese and the Japanese. There was a lot of issues around friends, acceptance, and whatever. And a lot of disturbance in the house because we had a person who was suffering and no one knew why. Nightmares, mood shifts. So anyway, it was an interesting growing up, and it built character. I think when you live in a house like that, it either builds character or it makes you sad or angry. Yeah. So fortunately for me, I wanted everybody to be happy. So I brought the joy. And I continue to my clients, and so they tell me. And I had a column for a couple of years called Resolve to be Resilient, because at 50, I started over. I was getting divorced. My dad had just passed. My mother was leaving the family home. I moved out. My son was in boarding school and struggling, and there was just one thing after the other. And so let's
take a moment. Yes. Let's back up a few steps.
Okay.
Emily joined us as a co-host for today's episode. Thanks so much for coming on, Emily. We're talking with Carol Berenger, and I'll summarize for our listeners. Carol just gave us a ton of information. Born in 1952. Her father is a Chinese American. Her mom's white. So back then it was really tough for her to navigate the friendships and the probably neighborhood and schooling environments with discrimination and potentially bullying, being isolated. And her father, she mentioned, had pretty severe PTSD. And that was not well diagnosed or known about at the time, but it's something that she used the word, she's resilient. And I think some of that comes from how she grew up and what she went through. And we left off at the age of 50 where she reinvented herself. But, Emily, you share some of, similar background as a person of color. So I thought we could just talk about resiliency and diversity for a second. And Emily, I'm asking you to kind of be part of the show today in that realm. We've really delved into that. And we have such a fabulous group of diverse individuals working on the Take Back the Night team. So I think that would be great for our listeners to know more about that too. Do you mind sharing a little more about yourself, Emily?
Yeah, of course. So I am a Chinese American. My parents are immigrants from China. My dad is from Beijing, and my mom is from a coastal city called Yantai. And so I grew up here kind of as a child speaking both Chinese and English. Unfortunately, you know, as you grow older and like end up in school because you're not practicing as much, I did kind of lose a lot of my ability to speak Chinese. And that resulted in this like kind of feeling of disconnect with that culture for a very long time. And thankfully, I've had like the opportunity as I've gotten older to learn a little bit more, to kind of reconnect with the language, to reconnect with like cultural touchstones. So that's become I think, more important part of my life than it was before. But I'm really happy to be here. I'm so happy that I can sort of share this with our listeners and like discuss this with Carol today. But yeah, I think that kind of experience of like being an outsider is something that's quite unique, especially for people of color.
Thanks, Emily. I really appreciate that. We did get the chance to share that with our listeners today. So, you know, where I want to head also with the conversation is Carol's main avocation right now is being the owner and operator and director at a Pilates studio. And there's a lot of folks who come into the studio, I think, wanting to feel stronger and also heal different parts of themselves. And, you know, we can come back to Carol's life story, but I wanted to share another piece of, as we talk today, think about this idea, body awareness and body consciousness for survivors of any form of trauma. You know, we're as frail sometimes as our minds, but we're also as frail as our bodies. And so part of what I've been loving in working with Carol in the studio is learning about how to reconnect from the fascia to the muscles, you know, to just stretching. And you could say it's stretching yourself, stretching your body, and just really feeling and being present about what it means to be human and to grow strength from that physicality, I think, of our body structure itself, and getting in tune and in touch with that. So for our listeners, I think, you know, we're talking about diversity, but we're also talking about inside of all of us, regardless of the color of our skin, the shape of our bodies, the color of our hair. We all have the same kind of inner workings. And so when you dig deep and you really think about what's connective tissue for the podcast is our collective healing, our collective support of one another. And that's kind of why I loved the idea of bringing Carol onto the podcast. Is she's helping people really dig deep physically and mentally into their beings, their bodies. Carol, what do you think of what I said?
Oh, that's spot on. And so basically when you come into a Pilates studio, which is movement, it's not just another group fitness class, and much of it is one-on-one. And so first of all, we deal with how do you get through your day? You sit, you stand, you walk, and you drive, and you need good posture to do that. And if you have good posture, you feel more confident and you feel more comfortable in your body. And so if you have things going on, struggling, you know, emotionally or just with, you know, life on the planet, that when you move better, you feel better and you're already balanced there and you are connecting mind and body because we're using breath. And so people come in and what could be more joyful than I spend 55 minutes a session, one-on-one with people. They leave feeling better. I feel great for having helped them feel better. And there's just no better way to spend 55 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. And also for our listeners, you know, one of the things I've been learning from Carol, and I'm speaking as your host, but I'm also continually loving learning. So Carol asked me to do things that I'm not sure I can do. She's like, do it again, try it again. And she's really thoughtful. And so another thing I get out of those one-to-one sessions that I hope that our listeners can get out of these sessions is it's care. It's taking time to really focus on someone else other than yourself. And when you listen to our podcast, you're kind of caring about we who are sharing our stories. And we're caring back by giving you what we can to continue your own growth and healing practice along the way. So I think it's a mutual, hopefully, although it's a one-way street, perhaps when you tune in and listen, I encourage you to find some way to go and either be helpful to another person or be present with yourself. And I just like the idea of doing it with another human instead of just in isolation. What do you think about that experience for your clients, Carol?
Yes. My studio is literally a community. There are people that have literally bonded together by doing classes together. The classes are small, just 5 to 8 maximum. And you're moving together and supporting each other, and small groups tend to share their stories. And this past year, we had a lot of women in their 50s and 60s who lost their jobs and had to start again. And the entire group would be supporting them all during their search for new jobs, or they go out to dinner after class. So when I actually opened the studio over 20 years ago, Pilates and More is the name of it. And the and more was that it would be a community, a place where people would come and feel part of it and feel safe and move their bodies. Again, as Katie said, no matter, what shape you're in or what size you are, we all move our skeletons across the planet with muscles, tendons, ligaments, and fascia. And once you learn the beauty of that, it relieves so much stress that everything else seems to be less stressful.
Yeah. So Emily, I was going to ask Carol to share what, the first session, she just made me walk. I was like, you want me to do what? In my head, I'm thinking I'm supposed to walk. And it was the craziest thing because, you're not a supermodel on a runway in heels. You're just walking barefooted on a flat surface for maybe 30 feet. And all I did was walk up and back. And all of a sudden, Carol had completely, diagnosed all of my problems with my posture just by watching me move. And it was really helpful. So I think, Carol, that conversation just sparked a whole awareness for me. Can you describe kind of how you do that and what you're looking for? So all of our listeners are going to walk somewhere.
So you can do this along with us. Yeah. So when someone comes into my studio and I'm meeting for the first time, I say, you drove in here. And driving is seated posture and driving posture. And the rest of the day, you have to get from task to task by walking. So first, we're going to start with seated posture because many of us are sitting a lot of the day at a computer. And when you do anything with endurance, we call that being an athlete. So you're a desk athlete or a computer athlete. So we need to build your endurance in a better mechanical way of using your body. And then to walk, people scuff their feet. They don't pick up their feet. They are right side dominant or left side dominant. Most people walk with the front of their legs. They don't move themselves forward. So they really leave with much more pep in their step. They go out and fix their car so that they're seated, and they fix their rear view mirror and side view mirror so that they know when they're driving, if they can't see, they're not holding themselves up. And when you hold yourself up, you just feel more powerful.
Yeah, I like how you said that. And another thing, and Emily, you might have a question for Carol, but I just wanted to add one more thing she made me keenly aware of is we spend so much time looking in a mirror or looking straight ahead, and we don't have eyes in the back of our head. So our understanding of, what the whole back half of our body feels like or looks like, or how we're paying less attention to, we're looking at our knees and feeling how they move, or we're thinking about our hands and how they work, but we're not often thinking about, what's going on with our heels or what's going on with the back of our necks. Or, even, there's so many ways to think about that we're not often turning around and looking in the mirror backwards. Not usually. So I liked the idea of starting to think about we have all sides. We're a 3-dimensional being in 3 dimensions of us have to heal and get through trauma. It's not just a singular linear process. So I kind of applied what I was learning to thinking about healing and trauma. Emily, what do you think about, my thoughts on that? Because we've talked to so many survivors, and I'm going back through my head, when they, they talk with us about their stories. Sometimes I think they feel really frustrated that they're not moving forward. But sometimes to me, like that moving backward and thinking about the rear view is important for healing too. What do you think, Emily?
I think that's so cool. It's so interesting, I think, how much information about our minds and our psyches, our emotional states that like our body holds. I'm a little bit curious about, how like that trauma or that pain most often shows up in people's bodies. I guess like what can we look for as people who've like, I'm not personally aware of how my body is at every second, but what are some things that we can look for that we might be doing, or places that we might be really holding that pain that we can sort of address as we're healing?
Okay, that's a great question. First of all, once we get up on 2 feet, we start doing things with our limbs and we don't move from our center anymore. But in order to start moving, babies first pick up their head parents go into a room and this baby picks up their head. They're on their belly usually, and they pick up and smile at you. Well, their head's half the size of their torso. So they're lifting from their torso. They're lifting from their center. They learn to roll over. They push with stubby little arms and legs to roll over. They come up onto all fours to crawl. They have to lift that belly off the floor. They sit up. And if they go to reach for something, they just don't take their arm and reach for it. They go with their whole body. And if they miss, they roly-poly over. When they get up on 2 feet, they don't trip and fall. They're walking along. If they're going to lose their balance, they plop down gently. So we have this gracefulness as babies. Even babies with disabilities, physical disabilities, are very graceful. And once we get up on 2 feet, we just start doing things with our limbs, our extremities, which are our limbs and our head. So your head floats on your spine with soft tissue. So in order to get all those things connected again, we need to get in touch with our centers again. And think of the size of your torso and the muscles there. And your emotions are in your gut. And the part of your body that's least, and air doesn't give you feedback. So once you get aware of your body and how it's moving through space, forward, backward, sideways, it just gives you, it's just so stress relieving. So anyone that has any kind of trauma that comes in and builds any kind of body confidence has so much, more relief and tightness. So when we are in fight or flight, we tighten up. And anywhere you're tight, you're weak. So most people have a lot of tightness in their hips because we sit a lot and we only walk forward. And I don't want to go into all the anatomy of that, but it uses the front of your body. So to start using more parts of your body brings more of everything to the party. And so you're just a better balanced body and you can have a better balanced brain. I hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah, that's so interesting. Actually, I'm now like thinking a little bit about like babies and how they move, and like I think like we have a tendency as adults to be like, oh, that's so clumsy, but very often like they know how to plop themselves on the ground if they're losing their balance, and there's this kind of innate sense of how things are moving or how you need to move because your body is I think so like differently built at that age. I'm curious if you've ever heard of this. Like I think I heard about this like a few months ago, that a lot of people were doing this kind of like crawling therapy, where they would crawl around on the floor to kind of remind themselves of like these sort of different ways that our bodies used to move. And I'm curious about whether or not that's something that you've ever heard of or ever practiced.
I don't actually practice that. However, one of the things I truly work on is how do you get up and down off the floor? Because people need to get up and down, like that old saying, I've fallen and I can't get up. you need to get up, or you need to at least be able to get to something to get up. And if you can get up only using one hand, it's supposed to add 10 more years to your life. So while I don't do specifically what you're mentioning, we do a lot of quadruped moves. We start actually lying down, then kneeling, and then standing. And we go through flexion, which is forward, extension, which is backward, side bending, and twisting. And that's all from your center of your body, your torso. So when people talk about their core, I'm not sure that most people know how large their core is. It's the whole torso. And for me, since your limbs, your upper leg and your upper arm plug into your torso, that they're an extension at your only extremities for me. And this is my made up story, but it works for all my clients, is from the elbows down and your head floating on your spine are your extremities. And if you work well from your torso, everything else will flow. Gifted athletes, mostly, if you watch them, they are graceful and they are smooth. And we can all learn that.
Yeah, it's very accessible. And, Emily, another thing Carol's been teaching me is that it doesn't really matter. Pilates is an accessible experience to any size, body, or any human. It's almost like you're thinking and moving in micro amounts, and it's so focused, and it forces you to almost like when I remember, I don't think I shared this with our listeners, but when I was in college, after my assault, I went through one stage where I was just pissed. And so I took up a sport called racquetball, because I could do it by myself and hit that little blue ball as hard as I possibly could, and it will still bounce back, and I could do it again and again and again. And just being physically kind of mad at a blue ball was very helpful. But it wasn't it would take my mind off of it. I always said it was good for me because it took my mind off of everything, because if I didn't pay attention, within a matter of seconds, the ball was going to smack me in the head. So I had to stay focused. But what I like about this is it makes you stay mentally present and thinking about something other than your trauma in a different way, in a really healing way. So I like exploring for our listeners all kinds of ways to deal with stress and anxiety and trauma. And we haven't talked about Pilates, and I haven't talked about racquetball, but I would say I would recommend both, and they're just really different. And I think healing you can explore. If one thing doesn't work for you, don't give up and say that I'm done. It's like some people try one counselor once and like, oh my gosh, that was the worst nightmare ever. And they give up on therapy. So there's not one way to get better. And I think sometimes in our lives, we need different things at different times. So for our listeners, I would also encourage you to think about life as a journey with lots of different doors and paths. And sometimes you're going to be on the sandy beach and it's going to be sunny, but sometimes you're going to be in the middle of the hurricane and it's going to be frightening. So just take it one step at a time. Carol, what do you think about that concept of really trying to, I'm sure your students who've been coming to you for years, sometimes they're in one mindset and they walk in the door and somehow they go out the door a whole different person. How does that happen?
Well, I actually wanted to pop back to Emily's question about the crawling, because when people have strokes and they can't move on one side or the other, crawling is one of the first things I know that they use there. And what it is called, all of that is called neuroplasticity. So that you start at a slower speed. So that's what we did with you. And Katie goes a million miles an hour. So to get her to slow down, I said, that's going to be our greatest gift here is just, to slow down. And she does. And so if you slow enough to feel your body move through those planes of motion, really and truly in just 10 movements, your brain goes, oh, I like that better. And so we start at a slower pace. So you might only do 20 movements in your first session. In your second, you might do 30. And inside a Pilates studio, if all the equipment is available, there are 6,000 movements available on 5 pieces of equipment. So it's a never-ending journey, and you can always get better. And the neuroplasticity part is that everything you do, driving your car, sitting at your desk, you will do it better. And So all of that's very true that, we are using this neuroplasticity to retrain our subconscious to feel better about going bowling or playing darts or playing the violin or learning something new if you have this confidence and you know how your body works. And it's like physical therapy that you give to yourself every day. Before you need physical therapy, if you have any kind of reason that you need physical therapy, people get through it much more quickly. And after physical therapy, many people are referred by physical therapists to us now, even for prehab, for surgeries or whatever. So all of the things that we're saying go together. We can't separate our minds from our body or our tightnesses or our traumas. That the more smoothly we can move mind and body together and the body across the planet, it's just a relief.
Emily, I don't think you told our listeners where you're in school and what you're studying and what you're doing with your life. So maybe tell them, because it relates a little bit. Go ahead and fill us in. Emily's in Michigan for quite some time now.
Yeah, I go to school here at the University of Michigan. I'm a graduate student in cell biology. So I am not personally a neuroscientist, but I do work very closely with and collaborate with people who are neuroscientists. Unfortunately, we don't study. I've never before studied like neuroplasticity and neural like remodeling per se. But I have done some research on like the brain and aging and how much neurons and like your neural patterns and that signaling influences your overall physiology. And we know for a fact that like the things that are happening within your brain affect your body and vice versa. And then that communication is just so, I think poorly understood, but definitely like a really strong area of like cutting edge research right now. So that's what I do outside of.
Thanks, Emily. I just wanted to tie that in because it fits so perfectly with what we're chatting about today. So thanks for bringing that up. So if we go back to my other point, just kind of how it kind of relates to everything we're talking about, like how you said 10, I think, Carol, you said 10, you do something 10 times and all of a sudden your body is a little retrained, which I like to think about because doing something just 10 times sounds like it's not my fingers 10 times, like what else could I do? And, and really make a micro, what sounds like such a small thing makes such a big difference. So talk to us a little bit about what you see with all your, people coming in and out of the studio and what do they tell you is really helpful or fascinating about the process?
Well, that how much more that very quickly they just feel better in their own bodies. That this idea of the 10. So I always say that, well, what happens is we do a movement and then, and we only do 3 to 10 of them mindfully. And then maybe 5 movements down the road, we do it with a little more intensity or with a twist or a bend. And it builds on that. And oftentimes people will do one and they'll go, oh, that was awful. And it's like, no, that was the first one. And I always relate it to like when you make pancakes, you never give that first pancake to anyone. You either eat it yourself or throw it out because that one we just throw out. You're just getting a feel for it. But some of the movements that are more difficult, we only do 3 and they're, further into advanced work. But when you do that third one, it seals the deal. And it's referred to also as epigenetics, that we have the power to make changes in every way. And epigenetics works out in the environment. It's taking a base and growing from there smoothly and slowly and not stepping over any point. So I also liken it to playing leapfrog. You can't go over frog 3 if we haven't gotten over 1 or 2. And oftentimes people will be easily frustrated with themselves that they can't engage their abdominals correctly at first. So I said, you just have to bear with me. I can't do your job. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't go out. I don't even know which car is yours if you wanted me to go, to your job. Like I don't know those things. So we just have to take them, one at a time and build on them. And it's remarkable how people change so quickly and continue to change. I mean, I've been practicing Pilates and teaching Pilates. I've been practicing it for 27 years. I've been teaching it for 25 years, and I changed careers probably 7 times in my adult life, in corporate life. But this one I will never get tired of, because each person brings in something different. They leave with something different. And the weather we've had lately has been so miserable that people say, oh, I didn't even want to come out. But the minute I walk in the door here, I just feel better. So it just all works together. And the neural patterns that you talk about, even our nervous system, it goes through the body. So the better you move your body, that you are bringing all that into the movement as well, so that you release caught up nerves that are stuck somewhere in the body. So it's just a process, and you can just go on and on and on.
Yeah, I like to go back to when you said it's Pilates and more, and the and more part. And I like the idea also for our listeners to think about, sometimes you feel like you have to go to a group discussion at a rape crisis center, or I used to, work as a volunteer at our rape crisis center, and we had group therapy. Basically, we would come together and talk about our trauma. And while that can be helpful, sometimes that's too much of a direct hit. And we are not ready for it, or it feels exhausting and like overwhelming. And what I liked so much about when I first met Carol was she was like, don't worry, Katie, you could be Katie Koestner and no one's going to care. No one's going to care what you do here. No one's going to ask you about what you do here. If people share what they want to share, but no one's invasive and everyone's supportive. And so I like the idea for our listeners that you can sometimes be anonymous. Like, you don't have to. And when I say be anonymous, I don't mean like as opposed to being famous. I don't even mean like as opposed to changing up your name. Like some of our guests have used pseudonyms on this podcast. I mean being anonymous. Like a lot of us who wear front and center are I am a survivor, I am a victim, as kind of the name badge psychologically in our minds. It's almost like it could be printed on a hat that we wear every day. Maybe this is the time you can take off that hat and just be you and be a different part of you, and not sit front and center with your trauma in a community that's still going to be really supportive of who you are and how you're growing and how you're learning about your body. Would you want to add to that, Carol?
That's what was the most beautiful thing to me, is that friends have been created and there's a safe feeling within the walls. And I think I mentioned that, during the past 2 weeks when I was excited, everyone comes in and we ask, how are you? What's new with you? And there's this very caring atmosphere. And I said I was going to be on this podcast and about Katie and how it started and Take Back the Night. And while I knew that quite a few of my clients, and I actually have friends that have been date raped or raped during a robbery or whatever, about 3 or 4 more stories were opened up to me. Like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. And they felt very safe, discussing that. But I never knew that about them. I don't ask. I wait for people to reveal. And that's just the community that we've built. And I think that, there are just places like my studio where everybody feels safe and included and accepted. And we all just need to find our places.
Yeah, that's so well said, Carol. So well said. Emily, can you think of something else that might help our listeners in terms of Carol's expertise? She knows everything about the human body, I think, and she's not a doctor.
Wow. Yeah. Off the top of my head, I think, can you think of any sort of like small exercises or things like that we could talk through our listeners here today? Or I guess like what to look for when you're going to any sort of Pilates studio or even a yoga studio in their area to find these sorts of spaces of healing.
Okay, so let's do something together. Everyone's probably seated to listen to this podcast. So let's talk about how our body's structured, and that we have this torso that's on wobbly stilts. our legs, go into our bodies, and we're away from gravity. So when you're seated, you are working with gravity, and we work from our pelvic floor to stack our spine up. So we want to make gravity our friend, that it's energizing by pulling us down, and we need to pull up, and then it makes us lighter. So, and Katie, you'll remember this from her first session, like, you drove in here, you're going to drive out. So let's start with seated posture. So everyone knows what their sitting bones are at the bottom of their bodies, and that you have a tailbone and a pelvic bone on the front of the body. So you have those, but they're raised up a little bit. You're not really sitting on those. And our pelvic floor muscles are not something that we are generally conscious of. And so if we don't start there, we can't lighten ourselves up out of the hip sockets and start to perch on our sits bones. And so if you just pretend you have a handkerchief, those 4 bony landmarks, the 2 sitting bones, the pubic bone in the front and the tailbone in the back, and that you just pretend you have a handkerchief, those 4 bony landmarks, and you just pull lightly up in the middle. It's not a struggle. It's just a light lift. Yeah, you just grew, Emily. I'm looking at you. You grew an inch. Okay, so what you did now was you just perched, and it used the whole leg, before you were sitting, you were just plopped down into the back of your thighs. Nothing was working. So that's what I mean. It goes all the way to your knees. So now you're perched. So now what do we do with this empty space between the pubic bone and the breastbone? Because if you looked at a skeleton, that's empty. So put your pinky on your belly button and your thumb on your breastbone, and just pull those 2 apart. Lift your breastbone up. Yeah, there you go. Another 1/2 inch. Okay, so now all of your muscles,
Everybody's excited.
Yeah, it's so exciting, right?
All 3 of us are kind of short.
Yes.
So we're excited. We just grew some.
So you'll be able to see over your steering wheel without a pillow. I have a pillow still, and that's how tiny I am. So you've pulled up through your pelvic floor, and when you pull, when you sit up like this and then do the lift of the breastbone, or think of pulling your belly away from your shirt, you are globally using the abdominals all around the torso. Most people don't know that there's a deep abdominal called the transversus abdominis that is like a corset around your torso. Now you've engaged all 4. So we're not just going to work in a crunch where we work the front of the body. We're engaging all of them. Now, what do we do with this 12 to 15 pound bowling ball of a head on top of a toothpick, your tiniest part of your spine? So put one hand over the other behind your head at the round part. So first of all, we don't lift up our arms very often in life, just to put those shirts on, and then push your head against your hands and your hands against your head. And you have just taken so much tension out of your jaw. So how many people do you know that will use a mouth guard, have TMJ disorder? So the tiniest, they're very small muscles, and for their size, they're the strongest muscles in your body. And if you have tension in those chewing muscles, you have tension all through your body. So now if you just pretend you're in your car and you're going to put your hands on your steering wheel, you're going to take your hands out from behind your head. You're going to fix your rear view mirror and side view mirrors, and you're going to hold on at 9 and 3. So now you've already corrected your seated posture. And if you can't see, even if you have a 5-minute drive, that you're slouching, and just gather everything up again. It's only 3 things: pelvic floor, belly away from the shirt or breastbone up off the belly button, and the hands. So it's, and you might, lift your seat up, or put it up from slouching back where you're enjoying your coffee or your beverage while you're driving, and living large. And then not to take your hands off the steering wheel, but right now, put your hands around your rib cage with your middle fingers touching. So it's like an accordion. You're going to breathe in through the nose and go sideways. Fill up your hands with air. Your shoulders should not go up. And as you exhale, pretend that you have shoestrings through your rib cage and they're pulled together. Inhaling and exhaling, your abdominals are meant to push the air out of your lungs and the junk out of your intestines. So if you just breathe while you're holding yourself up like this, you are toning your torso. You're using all 4 layers of your abdominals. So when you get to a traffic light or a stop sign, if you just take 1 or 2 breaths in through the nose and exhale through a soft jaw, it's a mini meditation, because when you're inhaling and exhale, monkey mind has to check out. So that's the most simple way to start. And then when you're standing, we would have to do a foot check, and that's a little bit more involved. But to walk, you actually do the same posture, standing on your feet, aligning your hip sockets, your knees, and your feet. Where most people are mistaken that their side of their pelvis is their hip sockets. Your hip sockets are actually on each side that goes up and inward into a round socket. It's closer into the center of your body. So you do the same posture and stand up. And if you stand up well, it lifts the arches of your feet, which works with the low part of your belly. Yeah. So, I mean, I could go on for days. Yeah.
Yeah, we all did that. So
it was remarkable. Everybody in the room
today, listeners, just for context, today is such a unique day on the podcast. We are actually, Carol and I are physically in Wayne, where her studio is, together, but we have a volunteer. My son's here. We have 2 more guests, volunteers. Like, it's a full house at the podcast house today. So listeners, just know we all just did that exercise, and I encourage you to do it, listen to it again. But my whole office full, just all of us grew a little bit taller. And the only other thing I thought was so fun today to tell our listeners, you can't see Carol or Emily, but one has green hair, one has purple hair. And so they look so cool. And Carol is matching her kind of purple top with her hair, and Emily's matching her green hair with her green shirt. So we look pretty darn cool. And Emily's a little more close to being the leprechaun for March 17th. But it's a fun day. I feel really positive and energized by our conversation, and by having a lot of positive energy in the podcast office today. So listeners, feed on our free love and goodwill and good wishes. Emily, I think your last question, though, Carol, as we close out, I'd love for Carol, I think you had said, how do we tell a good studio and find one? Wasn't that what you had asked, Emily?
Yes, you did ask that, and I skipped over that.
No, you're fine.
The best thing you can do is go visit. I speak to every client. Katie will know we had the best conversation. We knew we liked each other before we met in person. I speak to every new client. So, a business has the personality of the owner. And usually the staff that is developed, I have the most wonderful staff that each person, brings their own gifts to that. So I encourage you, if you are going to spend your good hard-earned money on anything, that you speak to the owner, or if they have, a front desk person. I do not. I meet everybody that comes in the door, and you want to feel at home where you go. Life is too short, and we all learned that when we were quarantined, that we just need to really take care of ourselves and spend time with people that boost us. So you want to find a place that you walk in the door and you feel at home. People come into the studio and they go, I feel like I'm invited into your living room. And it certainly doesn't look like a living room. And if you've ever seen the equipment, it's quite medieval at some levels. But it's just, you need to go and pay for a first session and make sure that you feel comfortable there. You shouldn't force yourself. You shouldn't say, I'll get used to it. Even when we're moving, it's like people say, oh, well, let me get through it. And I'm like, no, we're supposed to be building, so you want to do that for yourself. Go visit, make sure. So first, when people call too, I always say, where do you live? And what is your schedule? Because if it's not convenient for you or fit into your schedule, you're not going to stay with it. And so many people make resolutions at the beginning of the year, like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week for an hour and a half. Well, if you didn't go for 5 minutes last year, once a week, just be mindful of what your goals are, and make sure that the people that you're working with are going to work with you, that aren't going to ask you to do things that, put more stress into your life, or don't, you want to feel good. You want to feel boosted. You want to feel supported. You want to feel cared for. And it's not hard for us to do for each other.
Anything else that you would ask Carol, Emily?
That's fantastic advice. I'm sure our listeners will be able to really take that to heart and find really nice spaces in their areas. I don't know that I have anything off the top of my head. So Katie, if you have, any sort of finishing thoughts for today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Emily. I think the only other thing is, if you don't live near a community like Carol's, Carol, believe it or not, also has an online practice.
Mm-hmm.
So, something cool is we do have these webcam thingamajigs. So it's not the same thing as being in person, but it's at least a better option than no option. And there's hardly an excuse other than not turning on your computer and your camera to do an online class of some sort. So that's the only other thing I would tell our listeners is, with COVID's over, but we still have this online world that we can do, connection to other people and other organizations and other supportive networks. So listeners, please do not feel like you can't reach out. And I think Carol's, the internet goes everywhere. So I highly recommend, finding someone you feel good about and trying something new, even if it's just once. But that is it. Carol, do you want to close with anything else?
Yes, I would advise everyone to start their day rolling their feet, whether it's just on a long item or something not punitive, not a hard anything. Just, excuse me, I have to cough. Sorry. So roll your feet and do some morning stretches. Wake your body up gently so that when it starts working against gravity, that it's happy.
Thanks, Carol. Well, again, thanks to all of our listeners for joining another episode of Dear Katie. And we hope that you found this helpful. Go back and listen again if you want to hear how to do some of those sitting exercises. Think about us next time you're behind the wheel of your car or sitting at your desk, and know that we can all grow a couple inches taller, even just mentally. So again, self-care is also critically important. So we hope that you will tune in again and take each episode as it feels good to you, and encourage your friends and your family members to also follow the podcast and listen in. They can learn how to be better friends, better supporters, and better members of your family if you are a survivor through our conversations. Take care. Oh, and last, a plug for our hotline. We have it going strong. The Shatter the Silence hotline on sexual violence is free legal support for anyone who wants to learn about taking action civilly or criminally against their offender. So please continue to check out. We have a newsletter. You can become a fan of Take Back the Night for free. And if you're in the mood for some new swag, we have some great Artist Series t-shirts on our website. So thank you so much. Thank you again, everybody, for joining another episode of the Dear Katie podcast. I hope very much you found today's episode helpful, empowering, and a way to take another step in that long journey toward healing and supporting those we care about, learning about sexual violence prevention, and also survivor support. For those of you who don't know, again, the Take Back the Night website has tons of great resources, books, self-care options, cool merch. If you're feeling like you need a wearable, we have great t-shirts. Of course, we would love it if you follow along on our free newsletter with news and events going on around the country and even around the globe. And finally, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find our entire community popping up here and there, and recaps of our podcast episodes as well. So together we shatter the silence, and together we end the violence. Take care.